It was a good thing that I wasn't afraid of heights, only enclosed spaces, since the steam train we were on was clacking up an incredibly narrow track along the side of a mountain. I still did my best to keep my attention focused inside our car instead of looking out the window at the sheer drop down the mountainside, despite the lovely countryside. Much as I would have liked to enjoy the views of verdant green valley and misty peaks, the path was rather panic-inducing, especially the narrow stone bridges we occasionally crossed over, with dramatic drop-offs on either side that made one feel rather faint. I could only hope the train continued to hug the side of the mountain as it carried us farther into the lush mountains of India. "Not exactly the honeymoon you had anticipated, is it?" my new husband asked from his seat across the table. Normally I liked to be quite close to him, but the heat of India's plains was such that I didn't want to be too near anyone, Redvers included. The inside of the train car was stifling, even with the windows open. We were fortunate to find ourselves in first class, where there were far fewer people. I'd had a look inside the lower-class train cars when we boarded, and people were packed in tightly, not to mention the occasional goat. I couldn't imagine enduring that sort of ride for the long hours it would take us to get to our destination. Not particularly, but I never intended to marry again, so I never anticipated a honeymoon at all, I told him as I fanned myself with the ornate but practical hand fan I'd purchased in Chennai. And I will make the best of things, as you well know. I enjoy exploring a new place. Redvers' assignment to India was a political one and had come right on the heels of our trip to Scotland, where we decided to progress our relationship from an engaged couple to a married one. I'd hoped for a bit of time to settle into married life, but that wasn't to be. Not terribly surprising given the man I'd married, and it was how I found myself on a steam train headed into the mountains of southern India, toward the hill station of Ootycamund, or Ooty as it was affectionately called. I'd been promised that the weather was much more temperate in Ooty. I sincerely hoped that I hadn't been misled. The heat in India was like nothing I'd ever experienced, even in Egypt, and I'd thought that would be the end of me. The heat of an Egyptian desert had been child's play, as it turned out. "Can you give me a rundown of the players we'll be dealing with here?" I asked. Redvers lifted an amused eyebrow. "That I'll be dealing with? I'm sorry that you won't have anything you can assist with on this assignment. The trip will probably be quite boring for you, unless you find some sort of trouble to get yourself into." His eyes always sparkled when he teased me, as they did now. I wrinkled my nose at him. I wasn't going to dignify any of that with a response. Redvers chuckled, but then grew serious. "Truly, I am sorry that we seem to be hopping from place to place in service of my employer instead of settling down." I cocked my head and considered that. I appreciated the apology, since we had just come off another assignment from the Crown. But I also understood when I agreed to marry him that this was what our life would look like, even if I hadn't acknowledged it consciously. I also hadn't the faintest idea what settling down would be like for us, or whether that was something I even wanted. It sounded quite boring, honestly. "I knew what I was getting into," I said, and left it at that. "Very well," Redvers said, going back to my original question. "Lord Goshen is the governor of Madras. You'll be staying in the governor's mansion." "As one would think," I said. "Indeed. I will also be meeting with Paramasivan Subrayan, who is the Indian premier for this area, and one of his cabinet members, Ranganatha Mudalia."